Hello there. Let's talk about how you can improve your grades. The first thing that comes to mind is that you should study more. This, however, begs the question, well, how much should I study? That depends on who you are, where you stand academically, what your goals are, and what you're studying. However, in education, we have a general heuristic that says for every hour you spend in class, you should spend 3 hours outside of class studying and preparing. You can use this as a benchmark against which to compare your study time. If you fall far below that, by increasing your study time, you should see an improvement to your grade. If you meet that benchmark by increasing your study time, you should see an increase in your grade. However, it will be a smaller increase because the more you study, the more of the material you learn, which leaves a smaller proportion of the material left to learn. So if we're just dealing in hours, each hour you learn, you will gain less benefit, though you will be gaining a benefit. So you shouldn't consider 3 hours to be a hard and fast rule, just a mere guideline. And that depending on who you are, where you stand academically, and your goals, that you should adjust that. Sometimes you might need to study an hour and a half outside of class for every hour in class. Sometimes it might be 5 to 8 hours outside of class for every hour in class. It really depends. But you should consider that based on who you are and where you are. The second thing that comes to mind is that you should assess how you're studying. This is because not all study techniques are created equal. Some are objectively better than others. If your primary tools are highlighting and rereading books and notes, then I'd highly encourage you to check out my presentation on some of the more effective study techniques. I'll link to that presentation down below. However, I just need to warn you that no technique will make it so that studying isn't challenging. Regardless of the technique, you're going to have to put in the work. You will have to work hard if you want to learn the material to a 99% level. But that, you can make it somewhat easier, a little bit easier, and a little bit faster by using the techniques that are more effective. And you'll also see some sort of increase in the duration for which you retain that material as opposed to forgetting it the next week. The third thing that comes to mind is that you should take a long thought about how you respond to questions in a short answer format or in an essay format. As a graduate assistant, I have graded hundreds of assignments that fall into these categories. And I've noticed 3 distinct areas where people seem to repeatedly fail throughout a semester, or that entire classes seem to struggle with, and that different groups of students taking the same class struggle with. The first of those areas is in formatting. So following your discipline style guide. In psychology, we use the American Psychological Association style guide. I have a presentation on that style guide and some of the common mistakes I see, and I'll link to that below. So if you're in a discipline that uses it, you can take a look and see if you're falling into some of the pitfalls that I see as being the most common. I think that formatting is important because as you're in essay format, 5% to even in some cases up to 15% of the grade, the points available, can be earned through your formatting. That's a significant amount. It's certainly not a negligible amount that you would just want to ignore. Even if it's the low end, 5%, that's half a letter grade. That could take you from a B up to an A, from a B plus up to an A. I think that's worth doing, especially since style guides don't change very often. So it's likely that you'll make it through 4 years of college on a single style guide. And even if you don't, the style guides don't change very much. It was very minor changes when the APA released the 7th edition. There's also the benefit of following a style guide improves your clarity, which is the second topic. So by following style, you've already improved this area. You've already earned some more points here. However, there are a couple of issues that come up. Issues with spelling. You don't have to be an outstanding person at spelling. You just have to be good enough so that it can autocorrect to where it needs to be. However, you need to have a large enough vocabulary so that you can understand what the words that are being autocorrected mean. Because I hate to think about how many times I've seen a sentence with a word in the middle that doesn't make sense. And there's a similarly spelled word that would have made sense. And so that person got bamboozled by autocorrect. So watch out for that. The second area in clarity comes with punctuation. Punctuation is incredibly important. It sets the flow for what you're trying to say, and it helps you be persuasive. I read an English textbook many years ago that had the sentence, "A woman without her man is nothing." And it emphasized that just changing the punctuation without changing the words changed the meaning of that sentence. You can have a woman, colon, without her, comma, man is nothing, period. Or you can have a woman without her man, comma, is nothing, period. Those two sentences have incredibly different meanings. And you need to pay attention to your punctuation so you don't end up saying something in your head and then trying to write it down and it ended up not coming through in translation. You can lose points even if you knew it, but you just didn't convey it properly. The third issue I see in clarity is if we transition over here and bring this up. As you'll see here, I have 3 different outlines here. This would be a short answer format. So first, I have question 1. Question is an interesting word. Please describe the insights the assigned reading had on your understanding of the word question. This first one, I used bullet points to indicate my answer. That helps increase your clarity because it's separating the question from your answer. It lets me know exactly where your answer begins and ends. The second one, questions, is an interesting word. Please describe the insights the assigned reading had on your understanding of the word questions. Here, this answer is not bulleted, but it's in a different color. This helps me see where your answer begins and ends. This one, questioner, is an interesting word. Please describe the insights the assigned reading had on your understanding of the word questioner. There's no separation between your question that you're supposed to answer and your answer. It's not as if I won't be able to find the answer. I could eventually find it. However, it makes it more challenging to find it. And it makes it more difficult to understand what you're trying to communicate. I have to put more effort in. And the more effort that has to go into understanding what you're trying to say, the more likely it is that I will miss something. And so by improving your clarity, by following either 1 or 2 where you use bullets or a different color for your answer, you're increasing the chances, increasing your likelihood that you will be able to successfully communicate. And, you could get feedback on this. Some people won't give you detailed feedback, but some will. And if you get detailed feedback, you could go to that person and say, well, hey, this is what I meant. And if you can explain it, I'm certainly willing to give points back for a reasonable argument that fits in with what you said. And, well, I made a mistake here. I should have said this. This is what I meant by it. I'm likely to give those points back. But if you don't get detailed feedback, you might not know that that's why you lost the points. Or you might have someone who's not willing to give it to you. No, this is how I understood it. You need to communicate more effectively. So you need to take that into account and to think about how it affects your grade. The third area I see issues with is in answering the question. So this comes up in 2 ways. The first way is if you accidentally miss the question. Sometimes it happens. It happens far too often for my taste. Perhaps 2 or 3 times per assignment out of a group of, say, 30 students, that they've missed 1, 2, or more questions. And those are just points you've lost. You can't argue that this is what you meant because you didn't write anything. And so that's wasted. The second area I see this up is perhaps more nefarious. It's you wrote an answer, but it doesn't address the question. You can have an outstanding sentence or an outstanding paragraph, but if it doesn't answer the question, I can't give you credit for it. and neither can anyone else. So make sure that you've understood the question and that you can answer the question with your answer, that your answer makes sense. Seeing people totally miss the mark doesn't happen very often. I think it happens less frequently than people just accidentally missing a question. But what I see happen all the time, a dozen or more times out of a group of 30 people answering a 20-question short answer test, is that they will only answer half of the question. Make sure that as you read through the questions, you see this is the first part of the question. This is the second part of the question. This is the third part of the question. Some professors are not outstanding at differentiating between the different parts of the question, but you are still held accountable for them. So make sure that you look very closely, that you understand what is being asked, and that in your answer you have answered all the different questions, that you responded to everything. If you follow all of this, you can expect to see an improvement in your grades, even if it's just from spending more time studying, just from thinking about how you spend your time. I think that each of these things has a benefit on its own, but that it depends on who you are and where you are and what your goals are and what you're studying as to which will have the largest impact. Because if you're already studying a lot, increasing it more won't help a lot. But that understanding that a large part of your grade is due to the ability of the person assessing your assignment to understand what you're trying to communicate. I think that is a golden piece of information. And that it doesn't matter how great your writing is, if the person can't understand it, it's not going to give you the result you want. So let me know which of these you're going to try, and if you've tried them, what sort of effect did they have for you? Until next time, cheers.